working with over 500 cities around the world, and it looks different in every one of those. To your point, different sets of priorities, different policies, and different objectives. And today what I thought I'd do is run through a few of the trends we're seeing influencing cities and kind of how that's evolving, and specifically looking at street lighting in particular. There we go. So one of the interesting things is actually the role that street lighting is playing for cities. As you mentioned, for most cities, the street lighting bill is the largest single part of their energy bill. And recently, LED technology has come down significantly in price and improved in quality. That means they can save up to 50% or even more of that bill. And so for that reason, a huge number of cities around the world are now replacing all of their streetlights with LEDs. And the vast majority of those are seeing that as an opportunity to actually put in place building blocks that will help them fast track many of the other smart city initiatives that they're trying to undertake, and recognizing that by putting in place flexible systems, they can actually kind of, rather than viewing all of these applications individually, they can get economies of scale by working together with those. And that's one of the linked trends there is really this move of cities to kind of embracing open ecosystems to try and drive greater innovation and to be more efficient. We talked about the iPhone earlier on today, and its story in part is also about the way it changed the way its technology roadmap would develop. It handed over its feature set essentially to the wider market, which meant that 100 different people could use their same product in 100 different ways, and it made it infinitely more flexible and adaptable. And that really left behind those previous dominant players in that space that kind of try to drive and control the functionality much more themselves. And we see this in the smart city market because it's becoming clear that no one provider can provide a smart city in a box for every city. There's too much variance between what people are looking for and certainly the order they want to do things. And so this kind of move to open standards and as I say, an ecosystem approach is quite challenging, I think, for many of the established businesses who are wanting to try and have to change how they work with other businesses and indeed work with the cities themselves. And I guess one of the examples that links on from that is the ability for cities are recognizing that they need to change how they operate as well, and they have to start collaborating more across themselves. And this project was an example, the largest street lighting project in the world, over 500,000 lights being connected up onto a common network and a common software control platform, largely underpinned by energy and operational savings is what paid for it. But early on, they recognized that they could tackle a whole range of other challenges, one of them being the issue that's caused, I don't know if anyone watched Planet Earth 2 recently, they showed this in graphic detail of the impact that urban lighting can have on newly born turtles who are disorientated. And so they were able to build into the system a special control mechanism for these 637 turtle lights within this 500,000 that has been a huge priority for them and one of the big success stories. And I think this fits in the larger trend that was talked about earlier on of cities really focusing on trying to think about the citizens of all types within the city as these technologies move through from trial phase, and having the kind of wider citizens on board and recognizing the benefits is being shown over and over again to be extremely important. And I think the final point to pick out was the increasing awareness and visibility of security and IoT security, if we say, in connecting up all these different assets, which isn't actually something that really had very high profile 3, 4, 5 years ago as many trials were happening, and there was kind of excitement about potential, but because everything was small scale, it perhaps wasn't such a big concern. But many of those small scale solutions have now rapidly been rolled out across cities, and we're starting to see issues emerge. And people often say, well, why would someone hack my street lighting network or my air quality monitors? Well, truth is that history shows us people will always find a reason, malicious or just for entertainment. So that's one of the areas that we're particularly focused on. I guess our background in energy networking meant that we had a very high bar for security, and so we do a lot of work with cities to help encourage them to understand how they should approach a kind of a holistic approach to security.
And Brian, I know that most people think of this technology as enabling our cities to be more efficient and ordered, and of course we heard a lot about that from Dan Cruikshank's talk throughout history, this idea of the ordered society. But is it taking something away that, when we go to places like India, they're shambolic and chaotic and colourful, and that's why people want to go to cities. In a sense, we don't want to go to cities to have a sort of bleak, boring time. Am I being unfair?
No, actually, and a slide I was wishing I hadn't cut out of this deck this morning was one that really talks about the importance of making cities fun places to live, and there's a whole host of smart city projects that are tackling that very thing. The Playable Cities initiative is a particular kind of flagship in that area that we worked with in Bristol, where they really try and build in elements of fun to tackle problems in a different way. So in Bristol, they hijacked several streetlights. During the night, they installed high-definition projectors and cameras in the luminaire, and so as people would walk through the next day, it would record their shadow and play that back for the next person, and quickly people realised they had crowds of shadows following them, and that led to crowds of people gathering in the dark alleys to dance and kind of use this space, or other projects where they're looking at how to encourage road safety by making bridges more fun to cross, so people don't choose to hop over the barrier and run across the road, by putting musical instruments and other things. So I think you're right. I don't see this as a path to, many of the dystopian views we see in science fiction. Is probably not the direction most people want it to go.
Mm. I know in Singapore from my research that soon they're going to have, I think it was in Singapore, they're going to have sensors in rubbish bins, so that you're going to get told off if you put too much rubbish, and maybe they'll find out what you're putting in your rubbish bin, and sensors in cars, so that people can charge tolls. And it does sound like a brave new world. But
yeah, and I think you made the point at the start of the different attitudes to these different technologies around the world, and I think in Singapore, for example, they might welcome the ability to tell someone off if they've not properly recycled. I had friends living there who said that actually if you don't properly separate your rubbish, you'll find it back on your doorstep from one of your neighbours. So they'd probably welcome that, not something that maybe we would be quite there yet in terms of in Britain. And the same aspect comes to concern over data privacy, which I think is an evolving picture. I mean, we all hand over a huge amount of our data to Facebook, Google, and many of these organisations because we can see the benefits, or think we can see the benefits we're getting. Currently, we're not so willing to give that to our cities and to our government. And I think probably part of that is a trust aspect, that we haven't really been trained to trust our local authorities with our data in the same way that we might trust Google, because frankly they have to. If there's a big scandal, they'll maybe their stock price will go down. So I think
there is that element of huge trust in the government in Singapore, isn't there?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is how it works. But it's fascinating. Thank you so much for coming and telling us all about it, and good luck with it.